Prayer for me is a conversation with someone with whom I'm passionately involved.
Prayer's waking up to the reality that's there. And God, there's no reality greater than God.
Prayer is opening the heart to God as to a friend.
Prayer for me is just that daily dancing or dirging or whatever it is in my experience with God.
I think prayer is an attitude. I think prayer is a state of mind. And as opposed to viewing prayer as something we do, I think prayer and a prayerful attitude is something you are.
A man goes to his spiritual master and says, I've been trying to faithfully devote a whole hour a day to prayer, but my problem is I've got 3 kids and a demanding job, and there's hardly any time left at the end of the day for my wife. Tell me, what should I do? To which the master replies, pray 2 hours a day. So what is prayer? And why do so many people consider it time well spent?
When I pray, I'm not talking to somebody out there, a being that I've never seen or known. I am talking with someone who is passionately involved in my life also.
It's not just like a subordinate relationship. It is, but it's more than that. It's a relationship of friends that God wants most of all to be our friend and to have an intimate connection with us.
I pray because I need to be heard and I need to hear, and because I get lonely.
I think of prayer as my responding to the presence of God. And the presence of God is undeniable. So it's only natural I'm going to respond. Just as if my husband is in the room, I am going to respond to his presence in that room.
I like the image of a grandma God. I had the kind of a grandma who was padded and comfortable and could take you in her lap and could give you cookies and was a very comforting person. And I'm sure that my own grandmother has helped me see the comforting part of God.
A person's image of the divine often determines what kind of relationship they have with God and how they pray. Some people believe that just a quick check-in at the beginning and end of the day is enough. And others believe it's an all-day conversation, like John Street, the mayor of Philadelphia.
I mean, I can't sort of get up in the morning and pray and then, come to work and say, well, I'll get back to that when I get home at night.
Well, there's a New Testament verse that says to pray without ceasing. And that always used to lay a guilt trip on me. But now that I'm growing to see that prayer is more just a part of being present to God and remembering God's presence to me in my everyday life. That means when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling happy and joyous, or when I'm, all the varieties of human emotions, God accompanies me in those.
There's some days when I don't even want to be around God. There's some days when I wake up in the morning, there are people who wring their hands and say, oh, I didn't say my prayer today. And I think, some days I wake up and I say, God, I love you, but I'm out of here, later for you. And I know that he's never leaving me. But I want to be in an authentic relationship with him that I say, I need my space today, and he will respect it. And he does. That's the kind of God that I know. And so prayer is being engaged in this kind of relationship with this one that I can trust to respect my needs and teach me how to respect the needs of others.
People find different ways to stay in touch with God. Sometimes they go so far as to develop special techniques to keep connected. Some of these techniques can be quite creative.
I used to have a very small speaker that was hooked up to, like a little boombox, a little stereo. And I'd have that speaker right under the desk. And I would play tapes. And I was the only one who could hear it. And I've actually been in meetings and had people, very, very agitated, and I'm hearing the music and they're saying what they have to say. It's not like I'm not listening and I'm not concerned, but I need to be in a certain frame of mind.
I think God is always present, and that presence is healing and comforting and loving and warm, maybe sometimes confronting, but generally it's a very supportive, perhaps parental kind of presence, but often we aren't aware of it. And I think in our praying we become aware of it.
Someone once said God was in the details, the little things of life, the things we take for granted. For many people, prayer is a way to sense God's presence in the most ordinary moments of life.
So I'm cooking a meal or doing laundry. It's, God, thank you for these clothes that I can wash. Thank you for the food I can prepare. I'm wanting to learn more about experiencing God just in my everyday chores. I think that's really where prayer's at for me right now.
You may need to stop and breathe deeply to really appreciate the air. And so prayer is a stopping to breathe deeply of the presence of God.
There may be as many definitions of prayer as there are people who pray. When we come back, we'll take a deeper look at prayer and its power to change people's lives.
For a brighter future, just say hello.
One of my most joyous forms of prayer is to sing.
Sometimes it's just sitting down quietly. A lot of driving. I'm praying with my eyes open though.
But I'd say when I was a little kid, I definitely prayed in a more paternal, maternal sense. And now I think I pray knowing more of who and what God is for me.
I've thought of prayer before as asking for something, and now I've realized, for me, prayer is accepting what already is.
So it's opened my eyes that I may see the glorious reality that's really here.
My life is a prayer, of course. Yeah.
Is prayer just the power of positive thinking, or does it really make a difference? I mean, when you get right down to it, is there evidence that prayer actually works?
I have a real close relationship with prayer. A couple of years ago, I was in a coma for 30 days.
I supposedly had cancer, humongous tumors, huge. I'm supposed to be dead. I'm the healthiest dead person I know.
Hey, I can honestly say he answers all my prayers. It may not be exactly when I want him to, but he's always right on time.
And I just woke up and did the marathon that year, actually.
Purely almost superficial level, once I prayed that I was going to get an A on a test, and the next day it happened.
I had a financial concern that I was very concerned about and prayed very hard about it for a few days. And then I had a job dropped right in my lap, so it was very nice. I feel like it was a direct answer to prayer.
My friend just beat cancer, and I spent a lot of time praying for her. And she just beat it, and I owe that to God.
I feel like many things I pray for have come true. Usually I pray for the Lord's protective covering over my family and my friends.
Like if I'm scared and I can like say a prayer to God and I like get the power and I'm not scared anymore.
You just ask God for guidance as to how you should be living and the choices that you should be making. Maybe it's career or family or things of that nature. For instance, I just took a new job and I kind of prayed about guidance through that whole process.
Many people count on their involvement with God to help them through their everyday ups and downs. But prayer also seems to work for people in the darkest times, the times of deepest need.
When my mother was dying, I remember going into the lower level of our house and just stretching out on the floor and yelling at God and saying, how can you let this happen? How can you let this happen? And I don't know that I expected anything, but I wanted God to know how I felt about it. But my sense of God's response was that God also wept with me, that God was with me in my grief, and that it was a loss to God that my mother was dying.
Dr. William Harris is a professor of medicine at the University of Missouri School of Medicine. He's the director of a lipid research program at St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City. He participated in a scientific study designed to measure the impact of prayer on the health of hospitalized heart patients.
We decided to use sort of a randomization scheme to place people in a prayed for group or not prayed for group based on whether their medical record number was even or odd. And those of us who were actually organizing and doing the study didn't really know which group, even or odd, was being prayed for. That was something that was determined by one person in private at the beginning of the study, and then that was kept secret throughout the study, so nobody knew who was being prayed for. We had organized a group of about 75 individuals in the community who volunteered to be our, what we call intercessors, the people that would do the praying. Those 75 people were organized into teams, kind of randomly placed into teams, 5 people each. So we had 15 prayer teams, as it were. And as a new patient came in the hospital into the coronary care unit, they came up on the computer in the chaplain's office. The chaplain secretary, who was kind of our study coordinator, she would then determine whether their medical record number was even or odd. And we now know that if they were even, she would write their name down on the prayer group list. If they were odd, they'd be written down on the control group list.
Patients on the prayer group list were prayed for once a day for 28 days. Over time, about 500 people ended up in the control group and about 500 in the prayer group. A patient's progress was tracked by assigning a number value to each complication. The more significant the complication, the higher the number assigned. At the end of the study, the hospital charts between these two groups were compared. Remember, a low number meant the patient did well with few complications. A high number meant they didn't do so well. The numbers were added up and compared. The results were remarkable.
We found that the group that had been prayed for had an 11% lower score than the control group. And we did some statistics on that. Basically, we asked the question, what's the chance that this is just a random chance finding? And we found that the chance was about 1 in 25 or so, that this was just a random variation, which really meets and exceeds the standard that we set in biomedical research for statistical significance.
Clearly, evidence exists to support the idea that prayer is effective. We'll have more evidence that prayer works when we continue.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Like William Harris, Larry Dossey is a medical doctor. He's written 8 books, most of which deal with this explosive subject, the healing power of prayer. Larry, welcome to The Evidence.
Dwight, it's great to be with you.
I'm telling you, explosive is the word. Wow. Is this stuff really for real?
Dwight, the key point here is that this is bottom line, no fooling around, solid, bulletproof evidence in my judgment.
This is not fringe medicine.
No. This is beyond what we call anecdote and just patient stories.
Okay.
This is an approach whereby we put prayer to the test like we would a surgical procedure or a drug. And you can hang your hat on some of these studies.
Now, when you say we put prayer to the test, what kind of praying?
Usually, the people who are doing the praying are invited to pray in the way that's most authentic and meaningful for them. Usually, Christian has yes,
Judaism,
Jewish prayer,
Islamic
Hindu,
prayers, Hindu, Buddhist, the whole thing.
You name it.
Okay. Now I've got your book here. This is your newest book, Reinventing Medicine, correct?
That's it.
You, not allude, you actually spent a couple pages on this incredible study of AIDS victims.
That's right.
You took the toughest human condition and applied prayer. What happened?
Well, the study did look at AIDS, for which there's no medical cure. And the people not only had AIDS, Dwight, they had advanced AIDS. This was not early AIDS.
I see.
And so in the double-blind study, again,
Nobody knows.
No one knows.
Somebody's praying for me or
That's
not
right.
praying. Okay.
People are treated conventionally with the best medical care, but half the people are extended what the researchers call distant healing, which often involved prayer. And so the people who...
Now, when you say distant, excuse me, Larry,
yes.
but you say distant, you could be 100 miles away or 200 miles away, not just across town, or
Try
not down the hall.
the other side of the earth.
Is that
These
right? You have
people, in some studies, have been separated as far apart as you can get two people on the other side of the earth, and the effect still comes through. So in the AIDS study, the people who received the distant healing, also known as prayer, died less frequently. They had fewer what we call AIDS-related illnesses that kill people with AIDS, such as meningitis and pneumonia. They had to go to the doctor less. They had to go to into the hospital less, and if they were hospitalized, they got out sooner than the people not receiving the prayer. Their mental state was healthier and better during the treatment period, and I will assure you that if what was being evaluated had not been prayer or distant healing, but a drug, this would have been called a therapeutic miracle.
Really, a breakthrough. By the way, this is getting into medical schools now? People are actually allowing this to become a part of curriculum?
It's spreading.
Really? How many medical schools are into this?
Well, 7 years ago, there were only 3 who had anything to do with this. Currently, out of the nation's 125 medical schools, over 60 have actual courses looking at this evidence.
Is that right? Duke University's in on this?
Duke is big. This is the most high-profile study going on in the country now. And in this study at Duke, this involves people with angioplasty who have to have this done on an emergency basis. That's where they dilate your coronary arteries. So they solicit prayer from prayer groups from around the world for the people in the treatment group. We have Hindu prayer, Buddhist prayer,
If I
Jewish
were in the
prayer.
hospital, I would sure want to be on that pray group. Huh?
Well, you should want to, because here's what the study shows. The people who receive the prayer have a 50 to 100% fewer side effects from these angioplasty procedures than the people who are just treated ordinarily. You'd better hope that you get involved in the pray for group.
Yeah, fascinating. Now look at, not only, and this is what is so intriguing to me as I was reading your book, not only is prayer affecting the one being prayed for, but you've got a section here on the effect on the prayer, the one who's doing the praying. Explain.
Yeah, this isn't often looked at, but it should be. You know, if you talk to people who pray and believe that prayer works, and you pick at them and you say, why do you do this? Sooner or later, they'll just sort of throw up their hands and say, well, you know, it kind of makes me feel good. And so there is one study that looked at the health benefits not only of the group receiving the prayer, but what happened to the people during this study who were actually doing the praying. And they improved equally. The people's health who were doing the praying improved equally compared to the people who were receiving the prayer. So this stuff seems to be good not only for the prayee, but for the prayer as well.
Okay, so I'm watching the evidence right now, and I'm thinking, I got to try this. What should I do? I want to become a prayer. Larry, what do you tell me to do?
Here's what's most important. And if you were praying, you need to look inside your heart and see whether or not you have compassion and love and deep, genuine caring for the person you're praying for. If you have that, your prayer probably is going to work.
Not because there's something emanating from from the organism itself, because you talk about that's been actually squashed, but something else is happening. What's happening?
I'm glad you brought this up. You know, people talk about sending energy when they pray. Forget energy. There's nothing that is apparently sent.
No transmission.
There's nothing seems to be transmitted.
Okay.
Here, we've got to go beyond those old energy concepts about how prayer works. We're into a new way of thinking here. This is tough for people to get over, because when we think about praying, we think about sending something to somebody.
So it comes out of me, all thought consciousness now. It's received by I believe you call it the absolute, is that it?
Well, the absolute is my favorite term for the Almighty, for God. Listen, we should not get hung up on how this stuff works. What medicine is really good at is saying that it works. We don't really understand how prayer works at a distance. We just have to be honest about that. But you know, often in medicine, Dwight, we know that something works before we have a clue about how it works. We can do the studies and show that it works, but we may be a while in understanding how, but that's all right.
And the critics are standing up and cheering.
Well, the critics, I was a critic. I came around. Many of the critics have sort of been won over by the evidence.
Have they?
I must say there's a vocal, small number of cynics and critics who probably will never make the transition, who think this is just absolute heresy and nonsense. But progress will just sort of leave them in the dust.
Final question.
Yeah.
Your own journey. You started out believing in prayer as a kid. You allude to it. in both these books.
Right.
What happened?
I went away to college, fell in love with science,
Yeah.
became an agnostic,
Yeah.
thought that I had finished with all things religious and spiritual. But after becoming a physician, I saw patients who got well with prayer. I bumped into the evidence for the scientific evaluation of prayer. And frankly, I got to the point of saying, look, this looks as if it meets the criteria of science. Are you going to honor this in your own life with your patients and pray for your patients? And I answered that affirmatively. And then I began to follow the research and encourage the research in this area. And so I can't imagine my life working without prayer.
Larry Dossey, great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Dwight.
God bless you. What do you think? Would you like some more information? I'd like to invite you to check our interactive website. You can find us at www.theevidence.org. I'll be back in just a moment with some closing thoughts.
Learning English may be the biggest factor in the jobs you can get and the money you can earn. Hi, I'm Michelle, and I want to tell you about Hello Channel, an exciting new channel that teaches you English as you're watching TV. As you watch Hello Channel, you'll see, read, hear, and speak English, and before you know it, you'll be on your way to a better job and a brighter future. All you have to do is say hello.
Anatoly Levitin was a Russian writer and historian who spent years in the Siberian Gulag. You would think that prayer in a place like that would seem frozen to the ground. But Levitin came back with a surprising discovery. The greatest miracle of all is prayer, he would later write. I have only to turn mentally to God, and at once I feel a force that pours into me from somewhere, into my soul, into my whole being. We've looked at hard evidence today indicating that prayer does make things happen. Scientific studies have highlighted the connection between prayer and response in impressive ways. And yet I think it's important to remember that all our prayers have one essential answer: God. Our prayers are much more answerable as a means to that end. I have a feeling that's the secret to those individuals who have reported such dramatic answers to prayer. They are really aiming at something beyond. The greatest thrill of answered prayer isn't necessarily getting what we ask for, but reaching out to touch someone beyond yourself, to touch someone who's always been there. In other words, to commune with the divine. For me, my conversations with God are one of the greatest evidences that God exists. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.